system go, or
We're good.
okay. Okay, let's call the public hearing to order. This is the purpose of this public hearing is to address the zoning ordinance amendment to 193.7, which is deferment of parking requirements. Manager Trent, would you care to make a presentation? This would be for Planning Commission. Planning Commission approved, and here we go.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. President. Be happy to do that. This past Thursday, our Planning Commission reviewed this amendment that is before you tonight. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend to you folks that you go through the process for the first and second reading of this amendment. Basically what this amendment does, and it's something that got generated back in November as far as discussion with our Planning Commission, where both our planning consultant, Caitlin Hobbin, and myself discovered that there are a number of communities that are reevaluating parking requirements, not only within, let's say, industrial districts, but within their whole community. And so as we discussed that with the Planning Commission asked Caitlin to focus on some text amendments that specifically addressed concerns with the industrial district. And coincidentally with that, we had an inquiry by the new developer in our industrial district, Greg Dennis, as he's getting ready to move dirt this past week and build his first building, wondering about the very same in light of what's happened with the changes in industrial processing, the utilization of artificial intelligence, robotics, people working remotely, that, does it make sense to invest a lot of money in asphalt that never gets used for parking spaces? And so in the discussion that we had with the Planning Commission, we proposed that the Planning Commission, based on a request by an applicant where they would have to justify a request for a reduction in the required number that's specified by our zoning ordinance, that we would allow them to reduce the number of required spaces by up to 20%. So a simple math example would be if a normal site plan review required 50 spaces, if they requested a 20% reduction, they would only have to build parking spaces for 40. But on their site plan, they have to show where the extra 10 spaces would have been placed in case something happens with their operation where they require additional spaces, or if the property were to be sold and the new tenant does require additional spaces, well, then that site plan would specify the required number of spaces that they would need to have. One of the other things that our zoning ordinance requires too is a number of trees with the number of parking spaces. So you have to have one tree for every 6 parking spaces. So even if there was an approved reduction in the number of parking spaces, the requirement for the number of trees does not get reduced. So the applicant still needs to show the number of trees on their site plan.
I don't know if we should have our questions now or for the council comment time now. So to determine how much runoff would come off the parking spaces, do they still have to account for those parking spaces and that part of the site design?
So yes.
Okay, so they're still going to retain the same amount of water in case someone comes back and says, well, we actually do need this parking. So we'll do it then. Okay.
It's an excellent question, something that we would ensure the Planning Commission ensures that that's, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Mm-hmm. Thanks for that comment.
Somebody from Eagle. Otherwise, like, what's that?
Right.
Run off, and people won't consider that. Pretty soon we won't have any soil. It feels like build. And my reaction when Planning Commission is that it recognized the changes that were occurring. So when we implemented initially the number of parking spaces required for a business, it was at a different time and different stage, and without including the fact that businesses are changing. There's a reduction in number of employees necessary to run a business. A lot of businesses are finding out, especially because of the pandemic, that we don't really need all these employees. Then plus the fact that a significant number of people are still working from home. So there's just less parking spaces needed. So having that